man. Bring it.
This is Turn 1 Thoughtseize. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Ari.
And this is episode 111, and now for something completely different.
Yeah, I figured we could use a good Monty Python reference in the middle of everything that's going on right now. So
yikes.
We'll just start talking about some Pioneer and Modern. It's going to be good times.
Yes, exactly. Quick housekeeping, deck builder affiliate link, https://store.deckedbuilder.com/T1Thoughtseize. Please support them. They make a good product and they support the heck out of us. You can also go to patreon.com/turn1thoughtseize, all spelled out, and come hang out with us. End housekeeping. So, Pioneer has problems. And I don't know if they're solvable problems. And I know everybody's like on the train. And like I'm on the train too, right? Like I bought a ticket. I'm on the Pioneer train. Like I want it to succeed and I want it to do well. And I want to play fun Magic. As I see the format start to coalesce, I'm just like staring down the barrel of a lot of issues.
So I think it's less a problem, and I think it just has to be like a fundamental characteristic. And we're both talking about the fact that the format is just like cascadingly advantaged to the player on the play, correct?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I would be very surprised. I have not run the numbers. My feeling is that you are probably advantaged something to the tune of 10%. Like
I would guess it's higher than that. I think that it's one of those things where it was very similar to the Sultai Oko standard, where just being on the draw forces you to like play your entire deck differently and mulligan to entirely different sets of hands. It's not just like, oh, I have a good hand. It's like, no, the hand that's like good on the play, unless it's like your best possible on the play hand, is just not close to good enough on the draw. So I think part of it is the London mulligan. It just kind of makes it too easy to have an exceptionally powerful draw on the play. But it's also partly just like 7 years of cards accumulating, and they've all been slanted in the same direction. And it just happens that, yeah, like the most egregious cluster and examples of it have been lately with Oko and Gilded Goose. But like if you compile the last 7 years of cards, you just have threats that run away with the game and are impossible to answer, and answers that aren't really that good. And that's just like the two things that exist.
Right. And also there's still they didn't break the format off during a period of time where the design philosophy was consistent. So you have older sets that were allowed to fluctuate in power level, and based on my reading of the sort of like postmortem of the whole Oko debacle is that going forward, the plan is to have the power level kind of be flat, but also kind of higher. Not in so many words, but I think that's the net effect. And, you know, previously like RTR was very powerful, right? And then Theros was very powered down. And as glad as I am that like the return to Theros is going to be juice to the roof, I think what that means, partially for Pioneer, maybe for Modern, depending on like how some things break, but like definitely for Standard, is that like bans are the new normal. Like I think that was my takeaway, and I could be wrong, but like that is how I read it.
So I agree with you on their intentions moving forward. And I think that they're going to like, I don't know when the next time they're going to get burned, but they're going to realize that if you start making sets where the average is a 7.5 out of 10, cards just fluctuate randomly based on like things you missed, and you're going to keep printing more 11s, and you're going to have to stop at some point. Like you can't just have another Oko happen. You just can't have that happen.
Right.
I think that their like retroactive narrative of the power level between like BFZ and Ixalan is kind of interesting, because that's not really how I remember it playing. Like, BFZ and Oath were in an era where they were very insistent on, if they made something powerful, it was them like they had like a reasonable bar of power, but they were just like moving the dial around on what was and wasn't powerful between sets, so that things didn't like cascade and overlap, and you had unique things occurring. And Theros had some of that, and RTR and Cons, you can kind of see it kind of cycle through, where it's like multicolor's powerful, but then like Devotion's powerful, and it works with the like Night Veil Spectre, Boros Reckoner, like that cycle of cards that costs 3 of whatever color. And then that would cycle into Cons, where like the mana's powerful, but like the costing of 3 colors pushes everything up to the 3-drop slot being powerful. You kind of had this rotating cycle of what is and isn't powerful, until you hit Kaladesh, which just went off the rails, because they just I don't know. The issue with Kaladesh is largely that they broke the set was supposed to be cool in inventory and see what you can do, but in doing so, they just broke a lot of rules, and then also did 2 new things in the same set, and both of them broke, and that would be energy and vehicles, and both of them broke, so they're just completely new things in the same set. And then from Kaladesh, they were like, we have to scale back. So they had Ixalan, which was kind of this perfect train wreck of like, well, it's a tribal set, and Lorwyn was just like too linear and unfun, so we got to scale back on that. But also, like, we can't like match Kaladesh, we got to scale it back. But also, if you read their design articles, the Monarch mechanic from Conspiracy was actually in Ixalan for a long time, and then got taken by the earlier set, which was Conspiracy 2 Take the Crown.
Right. Yep.
And so Ixalan just had this perfect confluence of stuff, just like throwing it off the power rails. And I don't think Dominaria was pretty powerful. Like Chain Whirler and Teferi are good cards, and Teferi sees play in Modern, and like, or did see play in Modern. So like I kind of disagree with like this, you know, that's not really like the narrative of that as someone experiencing the sets from the outside, like I saw. And then they just like cranked everything up to 11, and Throne of Eldraine is like the 6th most broken set of all time or whatever, behind 2 of the Urza sets and Alpha or whatever.
Right.
And Mirrodin.
Oh,
yeah. So I don't know. So one of the things that we said is, are these problems solvable? And it's the kind of thing where, depending on what broken cards they print in the next year, they might just solve themselves in some new way. Sure. I think I was talking to people the last weekend, and I think we came to the conclusion that like you're only like, I think it was only like 4 or 5 sets away. If you had like cut the format off at Magic 2012, you would have Timely Reinforcement and like Snapcaster Mage. I guess Oust was earlier, but like those were the 3 cards we were thinking of that were in like the range of close to Pioneer that would like put a lot of reactive spin back on the game.
Yeah, Oust was in Rise.
Yeah. Oust, notably, there's a lot of low power early drops being deployed in the format because the games are so snowbally. If you just make a reasonable turn 1 play, it's good. But like, if you oust their Llanowar Elf, that sucks for them. It's not good.
Yes.
Timely is another card that's just like really good on the draw. Timely Reinforcements would kind of be perfect for the format. And Snapcaster obviously is just like a way to potentially even leverage any of these cards. And Snapcaster wasn't actually that absurd outside of the Vapor Snag scenario. So I guess it would probably be really good with Fatal Push or Fiery Impulse. But, I mean, as it is, reactive strategies in this format are not good. Just because the threats... I don't know how you're supposed to assault Scrap Heap, Scrounger, Smuggler's Copter, Oko with reactive cards.
Yes. Especially when, like... I mean, we'll talk about it towards the end of the show, but like the Enchantress deck that I've been working on, I have like a quote unquote death and taxes. Like I call it death and tithing because there's no like heavy tax effect. And it runs Archangel of Tithes, which is a really fun card. But the problem that I was having against aggressive decks in that was I didn't have any way to handle something, right? Whatever it is, goblins or like steamkin, runaway steamkin, like all of that stuff, right? Or like Knight of the Ebon Legion. Yeah, I mean, there's just a bunch of stuff. So the best way that I was able to deal with it there was actually oppressive raise was on rate for the first like it scales poorly into the late game. If you go, whatever, 12 or 15 turns, but like it's pretty hard removal right in the beginning. So oppressive raise is, I think it's originally from Theros.
Yeah, it was reprinted in M14 and it was in Theros, I believe.
Yeah, so it's
or maybe 15.
It's single white for an enchantment, so it's sorcery speed, and its creature can't attack or block unless its controller pays 3, and its activated abilities can't be activated unless they pay 3. Right?
Yep.
So that shuts down like a lot of shenanigans. So I've had good success with this card. I don't know if it's like a slam dunk 4 of. I mean, it is in that particular deck because it's the best one. But I mean, I'm running in the Enchantress deck. I'm running like straight up pacifism, and it's good.
Yeah,
there isn't anything better. Like, because Seal Away doesn't cover things that have vigilance, of which there are a couple of very important things. And, like you just have to stop them. You have to stop them for 1 or 2 mana. And there's not a lot of things that really, really stop them for 1 or 2 mana in not black.
I played against Peter Ingram at the Invitational this last weekend, and he had Pithing Needle. And I was actually impressed with that card in the sense that it obviously doesn't answer everything, but it answers a lot of the cards that dodge Supreme Verdict. So you can get like this 2-card thing that actually covers enough stuff, because you can Pithing Needle and Oko often before it makes a 3/3 because there's not necessarily always food hanging out. You can Pithing Needle, Smuggler's Copter, Heart of Kirin, Mutavault, and then Supreme Verdict to clean up the rest. But I think that kind of says something if you're like, I am playing main deck Pithing Needle, and that's where we're at. Right.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of, where we talked about a little bit and before we started recording, but like when main deck Ether Gust is a good idea, Oko is on his way out. Right. So if we're in a position where main deck Pithing Needle is like a good thing, right? We've had this discussion a number of times, like when main deck Surgical Extraction makes sense, something is wrong. So the very simple corollary is when main deck Pithing Needle is like pretty close to right, something is going to need to change.
In large numbers too. It's not like, oh, I'm just playing 1 to fill a specific gap. It's like, no, I just want to cast Pithing Needle in the first 3 turns of every game.
Yeah, just like,
yeah,
that's weird, but also something that I'm gonna have to probably try and do. So that was that. My prediction, RE Nykthos, is I think Nykthos is going to be this format's Primeval Titan. I think a lot of things are going to die so that Nykthos stays legal, and I don't know if that's a good decision.
I am on the side that I think it's fine. I think Nykthos largely is a card that I don't think is significantly different than the card was in Standard right now, where like Nykthos requires a significant investment in like battlefield position that is something that can be chipped away at. It just happens that all the battlefield position these days is not something you can chip away at. So Nykthos is kind of this exploit. Though I guess right now we got to look at this. There were 5 mono black decks in the top 8 of the last challenge this weekend, and only one of them was a Nykthos deck. It's kind of interesting because you can kind of see like the mono black deck Nykthos is correlated to vampires because it's correlated to Gifted Etherborn.
Right.
Yep. And then also as like a backup way to actually cast the Champion of Dusks that your Sorin would normally cast.
Yeah, so it looks like this. Gonti, only 2 Gray Merchants. 2. Wait, is this the one I'm thinking of? Sorry, I haven't seen
one.
Oh, this is a different one.
Yeah, so this is the third place deck from the Pioneer Challenge this last weekend. It's
there it is.
Yeah, it's got 3 Gray Merchants, a couple Kalidas, Knight of the Ebon Legion, Gifted Etherborn, Drana, Champion of Dusk, Thoughtseize, Fatal Push, Grasp, and 4 Sorin.
Yes, if you are looking for removal, black players, Grasp of Darkness is very good. Grasp of Darkness is the dismember of this format. So if you just need to kill something that's not a Gurmag Angler, but Gurmag Angler too slow. Like, what are you even doing with your life if you're casting a Gurmag Angler?
Yeah, Delve is oddly underpowered in this format. Like, people just assume that Dig and Treasure Cruise are going to be just out of the gates the best cards. And, well, I think Dig has some still problematic control play patterns that we might, eventually dig through times just a little too good. I think Treasure Cruise actually might have a long life ahead of it in this format. But, again, anything could change on a dime depending on what gets printed in the next, soon.
Right.
When's the next graveyard set? And as soon as that happens, something could go wrong.
4 Sorin Imperious Bloodlord. Okay. Oh, he has a plus Lightning Helix. You gotta sack a creature. I'm okay with that.
if you that card is good. It doesn't get a lot of hype because it's the narrowest of the broken 3-mana Planeswalkers from 2019. But there was the brief period of Magic 2020 Standard, for those of you who did not pay attention to the Standard format that was like not played in anything except for one MCQ weekend. Vampires was extremely successful throughout that time with just the strategy of like, you don't keep any opening hand that doesn't go like 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, or have a Sorin. And Sorin was just like instant win a lot of the time. Yeah, the card is just obscenely like, it's one of those things where you play against it and you're like, why does this have 2 pluses? Yeah.
Yep. I mean, I guess turn 3 Champion of Dusk is probably pretty good too. And then you also still have a Planeswalker.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that are just kind of... When you start playing against Sorin and realizing all the things that just like, wait, it does that too? It does that too? What is going on? It's, it gets a little much fast.
Yeah, and I mean, he's just, like, at the minus, right, it's just a mana cheat, potentially. You're trying to slam out something big, right? Champion of Dusk. And there's 4 Champion of Dusk, which I don't think in a non-mana cheat scenario that you would be playing 4 5-drops.
Nope. London Mulligan's also a big boon on that end.
Sure.
Being able to mulligan hands that are like... Basically, the idea is that normally under the old mulligan rule, when you would mulligan a hand, you might just like draw a hand that's like Champion of Dusk, 2 lands and some creatures. Like, that's just a bad hand. But now you just like never actually have to have a champion when you mulligan if you don't have Sorin. So...
Right. Yeah. Yep. So there you go. Vampires are real good. And it's just, are these like 75 card matches? No, they're different. Oh, because Smuggler's Copter. I forgot.
Yeah, so that was the unique one from those decks. It was 4 other mono black decks, which are kind of the stock list that are just like, there's the mono black Vampires deck, and then there's the mono black Vehicles deck. The mono black Vehicles deck is kind of like, it's the same basic concept as all the like Mardu Vehicles decks were in Standard, but then it takes the concept of Theros, which is just like, well, the best thing to do is put Mutavault into your deck, so you just play a single color, and there's enough good cards in black that you can play Smuggler's Copter, Scrap Heap Scrounger, Aggressive Curve, Mutavault, and win the game.
Yeah.
Castle Lochthwain also just like a huge all-star in that deck. It's really ridiculous that your aggressive deck gets to play 4 very good value lands without any cost to your tapped mana.
Right.
Usually. And Castle, like, there's a lot of good removal. Murderous Rider is actually just like a really important card in this format, which I think that's one of the things I kind of think is awesome. I think Murderous Rider is like a great card. Like, if Murderous Rider is among the best cards in your standard format, that's a great thing. And the fact that it's good in Pioneer is really awesome. Just like the amount of incremental value and like continuing interaction and play this deck has over a game is kind of absurd. It just doesn't run out often. The only times it runs out are when it like started the game with 4 lands and drew another 4, and then it just never had anything to begin with. Or like you're put into a spot early where like the fact that Smuggler's Copter doesn't produce a physical extra blocker, or that Scrap Heap Scrounger literally says this card can't block on it, becomes an issue.
Right. So they're playing one of Gnarled Scarhide, which is the 1 mana 2/1 that can't block. That is an enchantment creature with Bestow that gives the enchanted creature +2/+1. But what it really does is it's a black 1-drop that doesn't come into play tapped and can crew Smuggler's Copter.
Yeah, they had Gutter Bones, but I'm guessing that was too much of an issue for Gutter Bones to enter the battlefield tapped.
Yep. And very, very important, like, Night Market Lookout, which is the 1 mana 1/1 that when it becomes tapped, it drains your opponent for 1. With Smuggler's Copter is like a thing that has been done. I mean, in draft it was crazy. In standard, I don't think that Mardu Vehicles played it, but they probably could have.
I think that card ended up in a weird spot where the Kaladesh mana being like enemy color untapped lands just made it too easy to put Toolcraft Exemplar in your deck, whereas in Pioneer the Mutavault is just ends up being better. Or I guess like maybe I don't know, we'll see in the future, but I think that for now Mutavault and Knight of the Ebon Legion are better than like Thraben Inspector and Toolcraft Exemplar.
Right. So Night Market Lookout just adds an extra line of text to Smuggler's Copter completely for free. And so Smuggler's Copter gets attacks or blocks, draw a card, discard a card, but also drains your opponent for 1. And it doesn't, the other sort of like little tiny dig is the ability triggers when it crews the vehicle. So even if it gets killed in response, like you still get your little needle in.
Yep. It's effectively a 2-power attacker because it's whenever it becomes tapped, so it can just go aggro.
Sure.
But the other trick is that you can crew the same vehicle multiple times. So a single Smuggler's Copter on a stalled battlefield with multiple lookouts does drain. You can just tap them all. That was like pretty common in limited. You can also you don't, I guess with Copter, but like in limited, the oddball case was that you can overcrew because you tap at least. Right. So there were spots with like if you end up in a deck with Heart of Kirin and Night Market Lookout, you can tap like a 3-power creature and your Lookout, and that crews a crew 3 fine. So you can,
I see.
Yeah.
Yikes.
There's some stuff.
Yeah, so that's very good. I wonder if Painseer has a home in this deck.
People have tried that card in the format. I don't know what to think about it, but it is interesting.
I don't think it's good because like you would probably cut like the Scarhide and a Rankle maybe. And
Rankle, that card is ridiculous.
Yes, agreed. In a format where Wild Slash is the marquee damage based removal spell,
And Fatal Push is the marquee actually kill something removal spell.
Right.
Yeah.
Being 4 mana and 3 toughness with haste is very good. Like lines up very favorably to the available answers. So you're gonna get your thing, whatever the thing is, and he's like a mini smallpox.
It's kind of just you get to activate both of Liliana's abilities every turn.
Yeah.
At the cost of a creature. Like, so I will say that I did see. Well, we'll fill you in on the best use of Rankle via the filthiest possible play I saw at the Invitational.
I'm ready.
So the matchup is the Izzet in Soul artifact deck against Mono Black.
Okay.
And Izzet is on the play this game, and they have effectively gone, like, they've had their nut curve of turn 1 Ginger Brute, turn 2 whatever, that isn't just do whatever. But turn 3, they put an Soul artifact on their Darksteel Citadel against the Mono Black deck with no removal, and they've attacked. So they have a Ginger Brute and in Soul, and they play their 4th land, and the Mono Black player has a 1/2 Knight of the Ebon Legion and 3 untap mana. The in Soul player plays Skilled Animator and makes their Ginger Brute a 5/5 and attacks. And the Mono Black player kills this Skilled Animator with Murderous Rider, blocks down the Ginger Brute, untaps, rankles, forces the opponent to sack the Scissored land, and then makes them discard a Shrapnel Blast. It was just one of those games where I'm like, wow, I have no idea. It was Kellen Pastor, for those who follow the just outside of range of both Rivals and the SCG Tour. He finished 9th at the SCG Tour, and I believe was in somewhere between 9th and 13th place for the paper side of Rivals this year. And it was just like one of those things where I was just like, well, I guess Kellen's dead this game. And oh no, he can never lose.
Yep. So, yeah, I'm pretty into it. I wish it would, like, for me personally, it's not a $10 card because it's one of those things where I'm like, I could play this in Modern, but I'd feel bad about it.
You can't play it against Lightning Bolt. That's the problem.
Exactly.
It is obscenely good in Cube Draft. I learned that one on Tuesday. I had Rankle in my deck, and there were multiple games where my opponent just lost all of their things to Rankle over and over.
So I'm thinking he's almost to the point where I'm like, maybe this would get me to play Commander. Because, like, that seems like a good time. It seems like a time that I'd be interested in having.
I can see that.
The only other thing that has ever interested me in Commander, well, there's 2 things. One of them is Braids, which is banned, which is nonsense. In completely banned. Apparently, there used to be a thing where there were things that were just banned as a commander, but you could still have them in your deck. Apparently, that's not a thing anymore. So she's just out, which is disgusting. But the other thing was my Zozu the Punisher deck, because, you know, there's a lot of weird old cards that have alternate things where you can just, like, blow up lands for basically nothing. It's great. Free spells are always good. So there's just a lot of weird junk there. Plus, it has the sort of misery engine. And I haven't cast Knock of Mishra in, like, 20 years. So that sounded like a good time. But this is close. This is, like, on the edge. And it doesn't have any of the super duper commander pitfalls of, like, oh, I need to have a dual land in my deck because I sold my dual lands when I was, like, 16, and I don't feel the need to rebuy them.
Yeah. As someone whose favorite cube card might be Hokori Dustdrinker, I am listening to everything you have to say about this and taking notes.
Yeah. So who knows? Maybe we'll do a commander live brew commander episode or something for things that make other people feel bad. All right, so that That is, I think that's pretty much that. Oh, you had a note here. It said the question is if Once Upon a Time or Llanowar Elves is actually the issue, and then just
Yeah.
Blight Beetle all in caps, which I totally support because I love that card.
Yeah, Blight Beetle, despite like just not working in Standard because it just, you know. So last year in Standard, it was like, I'm going to play Blight Beetle. And they're like, okay, well, I still explore twice off Jade Light Ranger. And then my lands, like Nissa still... Nissa orders it such that it puts the counters on the land, and then the land becomes a creature. So it's not a creature when Blight Beetle would stop it from getting counters. And then it's also just not even a green creature. So it like... If you match up Blight Beetle against Nissa, who shakes the world, you're going to have a bad time. But it happens that in Pioneer, the Mono Green Devotion deck, all of its current alternative threats use +1/+1 counters. So it's just like, well, you can't use the plus on Vivian, and you can't play Voracious Hydra, and you can't play Walking Ballista. So that's all bad.
Voracious Hydra is a real good card.
Yeah, again, notable interaction in this format with that card is that when you double counters with hardened scales, it gets wild.
Oh, is it double play? Is it like one set +1 and then another set +2?
So you will, yeah. So if you cast Voracious Hydra for 1 with a hardened scales in play, you will get a 2 counter Voracious Hydra as it enters the battlefield, and then you'll get the trigger. And then when you double the number, you'll be adding 2, but +1. So your 3 mana creature is a 5/6.
Strong. I'd play that. I'd play that card.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable assessment.
Yeah, Hardened Scales is a whole other thing. I feel like Hardened Scales is definitely on the like Space Jam end of the power level for the format, and like everybody else is kind of somewhere between some bad basketball team. This is a very loose analogy, like humans playing basketball or like the Puppy Bowl or something, and then Hardened Scales is like on the Space Jam axis.
I think it's a little different than that. I agree with you that like maybe Space Jam's a good place to put Hardened Scales, because the way I see it is the green decks in the format exist on a spectrum between Mono Green Devotion, which is basically like the Harlem Globetrotters trying to set up for some trick, and then on the other side you just have like, I'm going to cast Steel Leaf Champion, and that's basically Shaq.
Yeah, Steel Leaf
in the middle, like a
good.
Space Jam is a nice way to put it.
Yeah. Steel Leaf Champion. I had somebody cast a Galta against me, and I was like, what is even happening right now? And they were unhappy when I cast Seal Away on it. I was like,
Galta's just how the like other like the green decks that don't play Walking Ballista are kind of inherently unfavored against the ones that do, because if they're on the, like, one of the things in the green mirror is the player on the play, because they just have their Llanowar Elves out first, is massively ahead. But on the draw, you can, in theory, steal games if, like, you Llanowar Elf better than them. But if your Llanowar Elf just gets Walking Ballisted on the draw, you can just, like, pick up your cards and go home. Mm-hmm. But one of the ways the, like, green aggro decks can try to get through that is if they just, like, play Galta. And Galta is so big, most things don't matter.
Yeah. I mean, hell, this person was also playing modern staple Colonian Tusker, which I didn't realize was in the format.
That is not one I would have thought of. Okay, then. They probably also had Aspect of Hydra, then.
Right. Like, so if you're playing the power, maximum power per mana, like, Colonian Tusker is in that discussion.
Yeah.
And so if you go, right, like, Elves, and then maybe Elves Tusker, and then Steel Leaf Champion, and something else, you're in pretty close to Galta range very early. Those Elves, man. And there's 8 of them. That's the other problem, is you can't just be like, oh, there's no, like, ban Llanowar Elves, because then everybody just plays Elvish Mystic.
Well, you could ban them both and Gilded Goose. You could just burn it all to the ground.
There you go. You could do the thing that they said that they were gonna do, which is like turn down the volume on 1 mana like accelerant creatures, and then immediately afterwards they were like, we're printing Land of Morals and Dominaria.
So that's an interesting story because if you look at the cards that surrounded Llanowar Elves for both sides of it, so literally for 3 years, they didn't print like a 3 mana cascading threat you could play. The best like 3 mana planeswalker was the War of the Spark Vivian that like has a plus that has no game text, has a weird conditional minus, and that's the end of the card. Like there's a static ability on it, but there isn't because it had to play against Teferi Time Raveler. There's literally no other text on the card. There's just a minus and +1 do nothing. And then they just put Gilded Goose and Oko in the same set and everything. Just anyway, we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Smuggler's Copter in this format.
Yeah.
Because it's really good in Pioneer. It is... You said it's the best creature in the format. I think I agree. And I was saying that it's, along with Scrappy Scrounger, but it's part of the reason the format is so bad defensively is because Copter is so good, but it's pretty bad at blocking. Even if it triggers on block, the fact that it alone, like, if they go like 1-drop, 2-drop, and you go 1-drop Copter, you can only block one of their creatures.
Right.
It does also, it does a lot of weird things too. So you were mentioning Night Market Lookout, but there's a lot of decks that actually have Smuggler's Copter with Goblin Rabblemaster. So that if they have a blocker and you make the token, you can just crew with the new token, so it doesn't have to attack.
Oh, weird.
Yeah,
I don't like that. I don't like that.
I don't know where I stand on Smuggler's Copter. It's like very clearly the best card in the format. I just don't know if it's like a best card for the format to have, even if it's like in every deck.
Right. Yeah. I guess that's the thing, right? Is it like, if you're okay with every creature deck playing 3 Smuggler's Copters minimum, then it's fine. If you're not ready to like take that ride, then you need to do something about it because people are going to play it as long as it's legal because it's the best card. It literally does everything that like a mopey creature deck could want, or an aggressive creature deck, or a utility creature deck, because your utility creatures still get to do their utility stuff, but they also get to attack for 3 in the air and loot.
Yeah, I think the question is whether you actually think you can solve the reactive deck problem or not, and I don't know. I don't know if you can.
Yeah, because good.
Yeah, until you want to take the plunge on that, I think Smuggler's Copter being your best card is perfectly fine.
Right. So I pulled some numbers here just to kind of see what the shape of the format over like a very short period of time. Like these are numbers that come from the last 2 weeks of play, but that includes leagues. It includes everything. So as far as I'm concerned, there's 4 decks that are like, if you are going to a tournament and your intention is to win, there are 4 decks that you can probably play, and 2 of them are head and shoulders above the others. So you can play mono green, you can play mono black, you can be a super duper contrarian and try and play blue-white control, or you can play Field of the Dead. Like, pick one of those and make sure it's not blue-white. Like, sorry, SCG grinders. Like, blue-white is a pipe dream in this format right now because you have no, you don't have any of the things that you want. You have exactly Supreme Verdict and then maybe Mystic Sanctuary, but you're already dead by the time that happens. So pick a deck that's one of those. I guess the Blue, Red, and Soul, I guess I would give that a nod as well. But even that, like, there's, I think the mono green deck goes, or the mono green decks, because there's sort of like some variation inside that sort of like mono green, mono black heading.
I consider the snake decks, those are effectively mono green. The Winding Constrictor decks, like the only black cards of them, it's like 4 Winding Constrictor, maybe Scrap Heap Scrounger, depending on how you build it, and then like Fatal Push and Thoughtseize. And the rest of the cards are just green. So I consider all those, all the decks that are playing Steel Leaf Champion, regardless of whether they're splashing a color, all the like Devotion decks, they're all mono green.
I mean, I had a Lord Garenbrig cast against me, like that Galta player, and I was like, whoa, that's a card.
Yeah. It's the third best 3 mana creature that effectively has 5 power behind Lovestruck Beast and Steel Leaf Champion.
The list shouldn't be that long. But hey, whatever. So to that end, I pulled the 10 most played cards, the 10 most played planeswalkers, and the 10 most played lands to sort of paint a picture with my numbers here. So the top 10 most played cards are Once Upon a Time, Llanowar Elves, followed closely by Elvish Mystic, Smuggler's Copter, Walking Ballista, Thoughtseize, Fatal Push, Murderous Rider, Opt, and Teferi Time Raveler, sneaking in at the bottom.
So I will say that I think one of those numbers is slightly skewed. Oko Thief of Crowns did not make this list, and that is because I guess Teferi also costs like $1 million. But Teferi was probably not getting banned, and Oko was.
Yeah.
Also notable that Once Upon a Time is like 9% higher than any other card on this list. Like
Yes.
It's like 27% for Llanowar Elves and 36% for Once Upon a Time.
Right.
Which is just bananas.
Yeah.
Like Smuggler's Copter is like 11% behind Once Upon a Time. This is the colorless card.
That is in literally every creature deck.
Yeah.
And it's not even close. So that paints like a very it paints a picture of what is doing well in the format, right? Like I don't know that you would necessarily, like, if you go to F&M and you're playing Pioneer, who knows, right? Like you're gonna run into all kinds of crazy crap. If you go to a premier level event where there is money and points on the line, this is what people are going to be playing because this is what is doing well. So make sure you can kill an elf, or make sure you win the die roll and your elves come out first.
Yep, that's about it. The Planeswalker list is pretty interesting because there's a card on there that I would like to bring up as being slightly underrated. So it was so the Teferi was 16.6% of the meta.
Yep.
And then just behind it, about like 15%, you've got Oko and Vivian Arcbow Ranger. Vivian being notable both for being a good card in green mirrors and also good in the green devotion deck. Just as a Vivian is basically the Ulamog that isn't Ulamog when you draw it in your opening hand. You can very easily plus Vivian on tap, next turn wish for Ulamog and nick those mana and win the game. Nissa Who Shakes the World behind that at 12%. Teferi Hero Dominaria at 9%, which basically shows you that about half of the people playing Teferi Time Raveler are playing it in like Azorius Flash or something like that.
Right.
Because that's just the gap between the blue-white control card and the not blue-white control card. 7.5% Narset, 7.5% Ugin, and that's the card I want to highlight because I think that card is great. While Field of the Dead is the most powerful like ramp payoff in the format, Ugin isn't far behind. It doesn't kill Copter or Scrounger, so it's in like a weird spot against that deck. But a lot of the green decks just can't defeat the card ever. With the notable exception of the Hardened Scales Winding Constrictor deck being loaded up with Stone Coil Serpents.
Right. Yeah, that card is like sneaky good. It is a lot of extra text on it that comes up. Like it has reach. Crazy, man.
Yeah, I forgot about that one until I attached my first Smuggler Copter into it.
Yeah.
And I'll probably forget about it again.
Yep. I try not to do it on camera, and then you'll have plausible deniability.
They keep changing which random creature type has reach. So it used to be like giant for a long time. Or It is. There was like Avatar for a bit, and then it was Giant, and then it was like Ogre for a brief time, and now it's like Serpent, and now you just like read Questy Beast, and like the third time you read it, it's like, oh, this doesn't have reach. Are you sure it's not like like lines down on the card? I really need to know.
Yes, it is. It is surprisingly relevant. Well, it's I think since Noose Constrictor. There we go.
Oh, that one also is. I guess
right.
You know, you're right. You're right.
I think that was the beginning of Snakes Have Reach now.
No, actually, it was even before that. Now that I'm remembering it, it was. Let me see. It's there was a Cobra from New Phyrexia that could gain reach.
Death Hood Cobra.
Yes,
something like that.
I only remember this because I only drafted green black in that format because I couldn't figure out what was going on, and that card was always in the pack with like 3 cards left, and it was the best ever to get.
you can pay 6 mana to have a 2/2 Death Touch with Reach.
Yes,
but it's always a 2/2.
Oh, I guess looking back, Nessie and Asp also had Reach.
Really?
Yeah. That a very key Theros common. Huh. Okay, so snakes do have reach. Never mind. I stand corrected. I'm never going to forget Stonecoil Serpent ever again. There we go.
Yep.
And then rounding out the Planeswalker list, we just have like 3 super powerful cards, right? Liliana Last Hope, Chandra Torch of Defiance, and Nisa Voices End a card. Just like generic good Planeswalkers.
Oh, Ramanap Hydra? Hold on. Ramanap Hydra has reach?
Well, we're going to talk about the fact that the card in the sand has reach. But yes, that one has been a problem for people in the past.
All right. I needed to get that out because that is text. That is text on the card. All right. Sorry.
Yeah, no,
Planeswalkers.
Then lands, you had pulled Breeding Pool and Botanical Sanctum No Shock as the most popular. Mutavault's also extremely popular in about 20% of decks. And then after that, you've got a mix of Azorius lands, Fabled Passage showing up a decent amount. The ETB tapped early is kind of an issue, but it's still a reasonable fixer if you feel the need to go 3 colors. Nykthos pretty high up there, and then also 3 castles. The fact that it's like the full 3 castles is interesting, because that's a lot of Garen Brigg, a lot of Locthwain, Garen Brigg being the alternate Nykthos in the Modern Devotion decks, but a lot of Castle Vantress showing up that much is kind of interesting. And I've actually seen a lot of Castle Arden Vale in the format as well in the Azorius control decks.
Yeah. I think the thing that's interesting here is that the only decks that need more than 1 color are blue-white X decks. So there's so much of this that's sort of clustered around blue-green and blue-white, and then just monocolor. And Fabled Passage is there as like a revolt enabler.
The only way to do it. Fatal Push is really constrained in this format. I will say, we were talking about Castle Ardenvale, one of the castles that didn't show up on this breakdown, and I found a deck in the deck dump that I really wanted to discuss briefly.
Okay.
And that is Zombie Rally.
Yeah.
So it is notably Stitcher Supplier is a zombie. Nantuko Husk is a zombie. Cryptbreaker is a good zombie to put cards in your graveyard. And you just have like the stock Jerry T zombie shell, Cryptbreaker, Diagraph, Colossus. I guess this doesn't play Relentless Dead, but it has Corpse Knight and Wayward Servant, which are notably 2 zombies that are ETB ways to make Rally the Ancestors a combo kill. But it also has Liliana Untouched by Death. That is... Okay, we're just going to read the text on this one because I don't really know why you would remember this card unless you are a zombie fan. It is 2 black, +1, put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard. If at least one of them is a zombie, drain 2. -2, target creature gets -X for X zombies you control. And -3, you can cast zombie cards from your graveyard this turn, and it starts at 4. But the notable thing about the way that this plays out is that the -3 lets you cast. It's not like Past in Flames where like the zombies in your graveyard gain. You can cast it this turn. It's just a permanent effect. So if you have like a Stitcher Supplier, you can cast your Stitcher Supplier and then play zombies you mill off that. And then if you sack that Stitcher Supplier to Nantuko Husk, you can play the Stitcher Supplier off of it. And it's kind of like a weird middle ground between like fueling rally, but also being a rally.
Right. Yeah, so you get a like a Yogg's Will, because your entire deck is that type of card.
Mm-hmm.
And then you also still have a Planeswalker afterwards. Like, I think that's the thing about this, and Sorin is the same way, is like you get to do your bananas thing, and then you also still have a permanent on the battlefield that like is going to require an answer in relatively short order.
Yeah, and the thing that's kind of notable about these decks is I've been messing with, so one of the standard concepts that got brought up in our Pro Tour testing or Mythic whatever testing,
Yep,
is that that basically there's 12 X-Spell artifact creatures in standard right now. Chamber Sentry, Stonecoil Serpent, and Ugin's Construct, not an artifact. But Pioneer has even more because it's got Walking Ballista. So you can port that concept from standard, where you're like comboing off with Midnight Reaper and Chulane or whatever, to Pioneer, where you can combo off with Grim Haruspex, Midnight Reaper, and like Cruel Celebrant and Zulapor Cutthroat and Rally the Ancestors. But the problem is that like you're drawing all these cards that aren't good. Like Stonecoil Serpent without an enhancement is not a good card even in Pioneer. But this deck, you start like going down this road of like, well, the cards that are fueling Rally and being rallyable and stuff are actually kind of reasonable. And that's kind of what you're looking for with these decks.
right. So I'm wondering if... So I mean, obviously this deck did well. I'm wondering if there's a way to like make it so that you can like Liliana minus and rally in the same turn and really just like go nuts. I don't know if that works though. That's very mana intensive.
Yeah, I think that's asking a lot. The one issue I have with this deck is that the way the mana works for white, but in your base black deck, is you're gonna have to play a lot of lands that don't work. There's like a Castle Lochthwain, and there's not a lot of planes. There's a Castle Ardenville with only 4 planes, and a Castle Lochthwain with only 8 swamps. So
right,
that might be the aspect to work on for this deck.
Yeah, that was, and we talked about this too. It's like you have 4 isolated chapels and 8 swamps and 22 lands. So like playing isolated chapel as just a tap land is very bad. So I'm not
really
wild
need to
about
draw
that.
a Godless Shrine.
Yeah, so I'm not wild about that. Like, I guess if you're running Fatal Push anyways, I think my first thing would be take out those isolated chapels for Fable Passage and like a basic Plains, and kind of see where that lands.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
Because at least that way you can get some extra mileage out of Fatal Push. The sideboard, I don't understand the sideboard. I'm not even going to pretend to understand the sideboard. It's 4 Duress on board, 4 Fragmentize, sure. 1 God Eternal Oketra, card's real good. And it makes zombies. So like it is a zombie and it makes more zombies. So that's great. Into it. God Eternal Bantu, same thing. Is a zombie, does all kind of like has another sack thing. Love it. Great. And then 5 cards out of the sideboard are 3 Gate the Afterlife and 2 God Pharaoh's Gift. 33% of your sideboard is devoted to those 2 cards, which to me, I don't like. I get it. I know the text on the cards and I understand conceptually what they do and I understand how they function. I do not know why you would play them.
I believe the answer is that those cards defeat Grafdigger's Cage.
I mean, you've already got 4 Fragmentize. If you're really that worried about it, you can just play 4 Disenchants too. Like, if you want to go buck wild, like, that's that is a thing that you can.
I guess
do.
I should rephrase. They defeat Grafdigger's Cage while still being cards when your opponent doesn't draw Grafdigger's Cage.
Sure. Okay. I mean, I buy that. It seems weird. I don't know. Spending 5 sideboard slots on it just seems extreme. But also admitting that it doesn't work unless you have some concentration of them. So it's a weird thing. I do want to give a shout out to my boy Lazotep Reaver, my surprise value play in a bunch of decks. Just one black for a 1/2. It's a zombie, and then when it enters the battlefield, the mass 1, so it makes another zombie. A lot of value there. A lot of value in a little package.
Yeah,
I am into it.
Ready for Modern?
I'm so ready for Modern.
Yeah.
I am. So like I said, I like Pioneer. I'm on the bus, right? Like we just spent the first half of the show talking about Pioneer. I'm in it. I'm ready to go back to Modern because, man, you wouldn't think that doubling the card pool would give you a lot more options, but it really does. Really, really does.
So we were talking about cutting off Pioneer at some point, and it really is the key defining point was when they decided to stop really efficiently breaking a lot of the rules of the game. So you've cut off a lot of the stuff that's cut out of Modern is like the broken expensive creatures, the fast mana, the graveyard outlets that are efficient. There was just like the pendulum swinging from like the Simian Spirit Guide days to like you have like, if you're going to break the rules of the game, it's going to be producing a battlefield. So it's like Simian Spirit Guide to Prized Amalgam, or I guess the comparable is like Cabal Therapy is a graveyard payoff even before Modern to Prized Amalgam is the swing.
Sure.
So yeah, Modern just feels like, even if like you can say stuff like, yes, Modern is a completely different format on the play, and it's different because a lot of the decks in Pioneer feel like you're just like, I am producing things that will attack you because I have more things. And in Modern, it's like, you can't describe Tron in the same terms as Burn, in the same terms as a Mox Opal deck, as the same terms as Dredge. It's just like, these are like vastly different decks. You couldn't just like imagine a single card that beats them all unless it's named Oko. But,
correct.
Yeah, it's got a lot more. It's an ice cream shop of flavors.
Indeed. Not that it is without its problems, because it definitely has problems.
It's I don't know if you watch The Good Place. It's the frozen yogurt place. That's what it is.
Is that like the medium place?
Well, it's there's just a frozen yogurt place, but it's frozen yogurt, but there's 10,000 million flavors or whatever, and today's special is like freshly mowed grass and like cat hair. I don't know. It's one of those things. But like maybe today you really wanted that, even though it's all still frozen yogurt in the end.
Got it.
So yeah, Modern. Right now it's a little condensed though. Urza is really, really, really good.
Yes.
And not just the card Urza, but I want to specifically like point out that the Simic Urza Oko thing pile is just it's not. I don't want to say it's not an artifact deck because it's an artifact deck, but it's like, it's not Affinity. It's just Jund pretending to be an artifact deck.
When you start including like, that is like saying that the Bant Eldrazi deck that got single-handedly resurrected by Oko, and I guess to a lesser degree Once Upon a Time, but like, that's an Eldrazi deck, ? It contains 4 Eldrazi temples and a number of creatures that are creature type Eldrazi, but they don't really have to be that. They could be anything because there's 4 Okos and 4 Once Upon a Times. So you could literally pick any other creature in those types, and I guarantee you would have approximately the same level of success, maybe more. If you played that with like Tropical Merfolk, where you're also disrupting their lands with
Spreading seas.
With Spreading Seas, like, guess what? That's gonna be bananas.
So
because it's an even faster kill.
It's worth noting. So my experience playing the Simic Urza deck, so the list, they have the War of Invention, sort of the Meekthopter Foundry thing going, but I'm pretty sure that's just bad. I've come to the conclusion that the actual combo is just Cryptic Command plus Mystic Sanctuary, at which point you win the game. And all you should be trying to do is just like accept that your deck is playing with 21 cards from 2019, specifically printed since like April, and those cards will defeat your opponent's cards if you just are allowed to play games against them. So you should just be playing like Assassin's Trophy and Thoughtseize or like Fatal Push in those slots, instead of like you just like are playing Mox Opal under the impression that like this is a way to play spells faster. It's not. You're not like, oh, I get to Mox Opal and do like this broken crazy setup thing. It's just like, no, I'm going to play Mox Opal and I'm going to play Urza on turn 3, and then Urza's going to make a construct, and then I'm going to make some mana, but I'm not even going to go infinite. I'm just going to use it to cast Cryptic Command, and then you're going to lose the game.
Yes. Lose the game forever. All right, I'm still on this Merfolk thing. Because we can call it Merfolko. Right? And hear me out. Your Ether Vials can get turned into Elks and attack for 3 points of damage. So I think what I'm saying here is burn your Eldrazi temples, buy a bunch of breeding pools and botanical sanctums, and go to town.
Can we just not have charge counters on our Elks? I don't want that. I don't want charge counters on my Elks.
But like, right? That's the text that's printed on the card. I mean, okay. We're not like... We don't. There's not a surge node involved. Like nobody's registering a core tapper, so we're not there. But also, this is a real thing. So, Nikachu, call me up. I got big plans, baby. Big plans up here. In order to fight the Urza decks and the Oko decks, right? People are going to Tron. They're going to big mana because like it's more, this is the Space Jam power level thing, right? Like Once Upon a Time makes mono green Tron even better. And it was already really good because all you need is 3 specific cards, and sometimes like, and before the limiting factor was like you have to play land Chromatic Star and then go land, pop my Chromatic Star, play Ancient Stirrings, draw a card, right? Like you do that whole thing, but you can do that before the game starts now for free.
Yeah, it's not a normal thing to do in a game of Magic is playing Once Upon a Time. Also notable, just like it's Karn, like, so one of the things about Oko is that the 2 things it does, it makes any creature or artifact irrelevant, and it beats down smaller planeswalkers well. Karn and Ugin are not small planeswalkers. They're very large.
Right. And
they're just out of range of Oko. I don't know what I have to say about Karn the Great Creator. That card's actually kind of at like a odd all-time low. It's another thing that people tried in those flex slots of like Whir and Oko, and it's kind of just like in the matchup, it's like, yeah, it's a Karn that you have to kill, but like it only shuts down like Mishra's Bauble and Mox Opal. Like you're not like turning off a food token with it, so it's not even that good against the artifact combo deck. Is actually just doesn't even care about Karn.
Yes. Also a problem. You have a note here that is all in caps that says don't play Burn versus Oko. And let me tell you, I've never done it, but I imagine it is like doing your own dental work. Like,
Yeah.
nobody's going to come out of that room happy.
Have you just like ever thought about what happens when your opponent plays a Gilded Goose and you're just like, huh, you played Healing Salve that casts more Healing Salves and it's in your main deck because it's a good card. And that's not even the worst one.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will put forth based on let's do the data and then we'll come back to because originally I was like, oh, like you can be prepared for Urza and it's not really a big problem. And then I pulled the top 10 most played cards, and so for this, the Pioneer numbers I pulled were for all events. These I just pulled 2 months of major events, and I was surprised and dismayed to see that the 2 cards that are tied for most played in the format are Engineered Explosives and Mishra's Bauble.
Yeah.
Followed closely by Once Upon a Time, Ancient Stirrings, Mox Opal, Arkham's Freaking Astrolabe, Urza Lord High Artificer, Dismember for some reason, probably because it kills Urza, Karn the Great Creator, and then Emery Lurker of the Lock. What do all of these cards have in common?
Colorless or related to colorless?
Yeah, it's weird. It's like you could play all those cards together in one deck.
Almost. It's like half and half. It's like
half of them it's half Tron,
like Amulet Tron, and the other half are Urza. I will note that Dismember specifically is one of the only kill spells you can cast with Urza's Tower, so that's probably a big plus for it. Zach Allen actually had a great idea for the Invitational with his Amulet deck. He actually just cut Ancient Stirrings. He was just done with it.
Yep.
It just doesn't find... I mean, it finds Amulet and it finds lands, but Once Upon a Time is just better.
Yep.
He's playing Explorer, so he can just cast faster Titans.
Yeah. Yeah. If they haven't printed anything bigger than Primeval Titan, casting your Primeval Titan first is way better. So this sort of like raised a red flag for me. And the other interesting thing is main deck Planeswalkers. I as a notable Planeswalker detractor, I tend to get down on them probably too much. Like I'll cop to that. There were only 11 main deck Planeswalkers that appeared in the past 2 months of major events. And they are as follows: Karn the Great Creator, Oko Thief of Crowns, Saheeli Sublime Artificer, the Royal Scions, which nobody's talking about, even though it has the very same problem as the other busted 3-mana Planeswalkers, which is it's 3 mana that pluses to 6.
I think it actually kind of doesn't have the problem because it's 3 mana plus to 6, but neither of the pluses generates card advantage or battlefield presence. So it's just kind of like an enchantment that it's like a midnight clock. It's just a very good midnight clock.
Sure, but it's just impossible to kill. Like, damage based removal against it is completely. It's a joke. Like, you can't. Like, they just printed Fry, and you can't fry either of these problematic Planeswalkers. Like, that's maddening to me.
So I guess the thing that I'll say about that is, having played against the Royal Scions in Limited, so the thing with Oko is that if you attack an Oko, it's just gonna like plus twice, and then like your attack will have been negated, and they'll have a thing. It'll just defend itself, right? Because that's like the big joke with Oko's math is that if they like plus an Oko to 6, and then you like you play like something they have to Elk, and then I'm trying to remember the whole math, but basically it comes out to that Oko protects itself before the Elk kills it. Whereas the Royal Scions, like, if you attack Royal Scions with a 3/3, it only plus 1s. And then it also, like, doesn't make itself better. Like, there's no endpoint where it's like, I have Royal Scions enough that I beat the 3/3. Like, there's still something attacking it. So I think it's more viable to say that, like, I can fight this Royal Scions in the long term if I'm like concerned about its long-term applications.
Sure. And then Karn Liberated, Teferi Time Raveler, Ugin the Ineffable, Ugin the Spirit Dragon, Jace the Mind Sculptor, Liliana the Veil, and Ren and 6, Scourge of Legacy No More, bringing up the rear at 1.4%.
Yeah, Ren has this problem where like you have to play Jund to play it, and in Modern you just don't want to do that. It's also kind of comical that Liliana and Jace are just like they're
Rans.
Whatever.
They're not even gonna get. They're not gonna get an invite to the debate. Like the president is going to be someone else because they don't have enough votes.
Also, the fact that Ugin the Ineffable and Ugin the Spirit Dragon are tied is just like blowing my mind.
Yeah. Hey, we called that card as being very good, and then people just like dumped on it, and it has been gaining market share steadily. It's a turtle. Slow and steady wins the race.
Of note, 7 of these 11 Planeswalkers are printed this calendar year. And the only 4 that aren't are the very obvious 2 previous best Planeswalkers of all time and 2 Troniest Planeswalkers of all time.
Right. Yeah. Yep. A lot of power clustered in the past 12 months.
So with Ugin the Ineffable, that's obviously an Eldrazi Tron card. That's where that card has seen a lot of play.
Yep.
I didn't really love it, but it makes sense in an Oko world because the cards I liked in the big mana slot instead were like Endbringer, which you just can't these days.
Right. Yeah.
I will say, the Eldrazi deck, despite like there's this common knowledge that it's like, well, you're playing big derpy creatures, that's bad against Oko, but they're not actually that bad because the first 5-power hit of haste off of a Reality Smasher is pretty good, and making a Thought-Knot Seer into an Elk. Like, the remaining text on that card when it's on the battlefield is a drawback, and removing that does matter.
Mm-hmm.
So you just get like a free discard on your 3/3, which is pretty good.
Yeah. So all right. So is the next level play? Oh no, I think that the next level is 4-color Oko, where you do that with your Tide Hollow Scullers.
Ooh. Yeah, that's nice. Or Spell Queller. That was the other one.
Spell Queller is actually the really gross one that isn't like some 4-color monstrosity.
I will say anything that gets Matter Reshaper out of my deck makes me happy.
Yeah, that card. I got a
Whoa,
lot.
You called it a card? Oh, I don't know if I can agree with that statement.
I mean, it is a cantrip that can attack and block. And occasionally it will flip over a Chalice for 0 and you'll feel like the biggest idiot in the world.
Its major text is like, can block for a card once.
Yeah, get him. It's colorless roadblock. It's a steel wall with upside, like a more expensive steel wall. I can't think of a 3-mana wall off the top of my head.
Steel Wall might survive a combat step. Matter Reshaper is some percentage to flip another Matter Reshaper, which is how it survives a combat step.
That's bleak.
Yeah. Let's see.
So I said Urza is a huge problem, and you countered with.
I said Urza is Bloodbraid Elf, to Oko being Liliana the Veil and Mox Opal being Deathrite Shaman. If Urza is the way that your artifacts are exploited, I think it's largely fine. It's like a 4-mana value play with some other considerations, but when you combo off with Urza like on the spot, it's often because you've already assembled like a prior combo in some way. I guess outside of the Paradoxical Outcome deck, but that's some weird territory. It's largely just really good because it like makes a construct and then you like have immediate value that you can leverage for more value. I don't really see it as like a huge. It's very good, but I think that if that is the most powerful card, something's going kind of okay. It's not like Quark Clan Ironworks where you cast it and the game ends. It's not 4 mana win the game. It's like 4 mana very powerful card that will win the game eventually. Whereas the cards that fundamentally break things are being able to cast Urza early with, Mox Opal at no previous cost, or Oko just being Oko, which I will say there's like a noticeable difference between Oko and other formats or decks in this, because in this format it really is just +1 make a 3/3, because there's so many Arkham's Astrolabes, Mishra's Baubles, Mox Opals, etc. Though there is a weird caveat where the Elks are still legendary permanents with their previous name. So if you have a Mox Opal that's an Elk and then you play another Mox Opal, it doesn't work out well. Don't do that.
Weird. Layers.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's layers or timestamps. Who knows? It's one of those. One of those things that like L2 judges talk about. Like L2s and L3s are always like, oh, layers, and
I don't. It might fall under layers or copyable values or something. I don't know. There's like a definition of all the values. Anyways, neither here nor there. Mox Opal is still a legendary elk.
There you go. So I think then, right? So the issue is for me that when you have Urza and Oko together, you have the choice of playing 16 Mox Sapphires and or playing a bunch of 0 mana 3/3s. And like those are both really good things, and they're good at different times, and the best part is you don't have to decide which one you want to play before you start playing the game. So you already have the information by the time you decide. Like, you're not just putting 16 Mox Sapphires in your deck. They also do other stuff if you want. And you're not...
The important part is like, once you make the committing decision of like, I'm going to play this card and do that stuff, like, even if they kill your Urza or your Oko, it's like, well, I already have made mana or a 3/3. You're not getting out of that exchange cleanly.
Yeah.
So this deck is like, it is a mid-range deck, so there's been some pushback with more aggressive decks. Grixis Death Shadow has won a lot, and I think the strength of that deck is largely because Gurmag Angler and Death Shadow split the Engineered Explosives range on Urza. Like, Fatal Push and EE get split side to side on that. You can fight over Cryptic Command and their creatures. Even if you get Elked, the Royal Scions pushes pretty hard. Grixis Death Shadow has looked pretty impressive recently.
Yep.
And again, we see a lot of the Royal Signs. I think that's basically exclusive where it's at. I guess I do want to say the Engineered Explosives thing is specifically because Emery is actually the least powerful 2019 Magic card in this deck, which is kind of unbelievable. But the two things it does, it has like tap draw a card with Mishra's Bauble, and it has tap recur Engineered Explosives. So you can't just like... If you were to play Jund Death Shadow, you could never beat an untapped Emery, because it would just get back EE and kill all of your cards, and then it would do it again and again. But Grixis Shadow can beat that. Which makes me wonder why Humans is doing good. I guess like you can Meddling Mage EE, but that's it, and they can beat that.
I think it's the aggro thing, right? Is like if they lead on Hierarch, then you can be like Mantis Ridering them on turn 2, and I don't think that they can really keep up with that.
I don't know if it's... I think it's more the Champion of the Parish draws, because if you Elk a Champion or something with a Thalia counter, you don't parry it with your Elk, because it's got a counter.
Oh, that's true. Okay, sure. Yeah, that was one of the play patterns that I was sort of like butting up against with Oko. Is it's like there's a lot of things that where you can where you end up sort of just canceling each other out, right? It's like the Genesis Chamber thing, where like I've got all these mirrors, but you've got all these mirrors, so they don't count. You can just sort of discount them, and Oko has like kind of shades of that, right? Because it's like if you give them a 3/3, you can get your own 3/3, and they just butt up against each other. So I guess breaking that symmetry is real. I guess that's a pretty big game.
Ooh, to throw back to something you mentioned earlier, that is one upside of Yorvo, King of Garenbreg, is that when you make Yorvo into an elk, it goes big.
defining upsides of cards in terms of what happens to it after it gets turned into an elk is a bad thing.
This is, that's been Magic for the last 2 months, and we're just going to enjoy it while it lasts.
Yep. Yeah, let's see. Yorvo, Lord of Garenbreg. Green, green, green. For 0/0, Giant Noble. He is both of those things. Yorvo enters the battlefield with 4 +1/+1 counters on it. Whenever another green creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter. Then if that creature's power is greater than Yorvo's power, put another +1/+1 counter on it. Yeah, I guess I didn't fully appreciate how good this card is in big green decks. Huh. Look at that. Oh, it's even got a borderless printing. Yeah. Elks. Elks, baby. Because the elks are green, right?
That is correct.
Oh.
Well, the elks don't enter the battlefield, but yeah.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah, don't play Yorvo into a Blight Beetle. Don't do that. That's the other problem.
That's amazing. I like that visual. It's like he just comes like trundling out of this dimensional breach and like steps on a beetle and it just murders him and he falls over dead.
He just literally implodes.
Like, what? Oh, I missed the beetle. So that's kind of what's going on. I'm playing 2 Once Upon a Time decks in Modern right now. Because Once Upon a Time allows me to play 15 land Bug Shadow, like even more than I already could, and I was already doing pretty well with it after they printed Winding Way. And or not Winding Way, but just Traverse. Like Traverse was enough because I built the deck to work on like 1 or 2 mana, so I was already doing pretty well with it, and now like Once Upon a Time just like blew the doors off. So it's Turbo Xerox to a degree that I don't think was possible at the time when that was first conceived. And then Once Upon a Time also gave like a big power level jump to the Kieran deck, because now I don't have to play 4 Winding Ways. I can play 2 Winding Ways and I can cut down on other stuff. So like I don't need to play any of the commune cards anymore. And I'm just like, because it's a creature based combo deck that I also need to find lands for, it searches for everything that I need, or sorry, searches in quotes, effectively searches.
You'll find it, don't worry. That's how the
I
card
always
works.
Right, like it's so consistent now that I'm just like, I can go Once Upon a Time before the start of the game, get whatever piece I don't have in my opener, and then just go like 1-2 like land hierarch, land, doesn't matter, path your thing, and then Kieran, blow up the world, play a forest, play a Hooting Mandrills, and then just win. And that is like, that's the deck right now, and I am super into it. It's very satisfying for me. But in Pioneer, so I've struggled to find a Pioneer deck that I really like, and I've settled on updated Abzan Constellation. I have a lot of affection, as people know, for Journey into Nyx. Enchantment creature is like just something that strikes me as really cool. So what I did is I started back from the standard constellation lists from a bazillion years ago and sort of worked my way forward. The cards that are in it occupy sort of a weird space of being difficult to kill by the non-damage based removal. It's like, it's a little bit soft to Wild Slash, but it's really good against Fatal Push. because the Satyr Enchanter is 3 mana, Eidolon of Blossoms is 4 mana. So if they don't have a Wild Slash for it, then they're kind of stuck until they can trigger Revolt. Let me pull up the list that I started from. I believe it was this one. Yes. So I started from an Abzan Constellation list from a SCG Open back in 2015 that just happened to catch my eye, and I liked the look of it because it had it was late enough in the format that Origins was there. So it had Boon Satyr, Courser of Krufix, Doomwake Giant, Eidolon of Blossoms, Herald of the Pantheon, Nyx Fleece Ram, 4 Banishing Light, 2 Frontier Siege, 3 Sigil of the Empty Throne, 4 Silk Wrap, 2 Starfielded Nyx, and then a bunch of unplayable sideboard cards. Like, it was playing an Extinguish All Hope in the sideboard. That is not a playable Magic card in any other world. But it also had, like, Silk Wrap. Obviously, like, we have in Pioneer, there are better things. So I sort of use this as the template and then juiced it up where it was available to be juiced up and ran it through a couple of iterations. The most recent of which is either 23 lands and 2 Vessel of Nascency, or 24 lands and some other one of instead of that Vessel of Nascency. Nyx Fleece Ram, Pacifism, which I touched on earlier, Seal Away, 4 Herald of the Pantheon, 4 Satyr Enchanters, 4 Eidolon of Blossoms, 4 Courser of Krufix, which also lines up very well against a lot of the threats in the format. 4 Banishing Light, which is a card that I was not expecting to be as good as it is, but like being a flexible answer that also exiles has proved to be very useful. Frontier Siege, like, it is a ramp deck in a sense. Because you're trying to cheat on mana, so the ramp is partially cost reduction from Herald of the Pantheon and partially from Frontier Siege, which I don't think saw any real constructed play during Khan's block, but it's part of the Siege cycle. It's 3 and a green, and the relevant mode is at the beginning of each of your main phases, it adds green to your mana pool. So you end up with these sort of turns where pre-combat you play something, draw a bunch of cards off of your Eidolons and Satyr Enchanters, and then post-combat, or I'm sorry, pre-combat, you'll like play Sigil of the Empty Throne or Doomwake Giant, and then attack or do whatever. And then post-combat, you get more mana, and you will keep doing things that generate more triggers. So, and then obviously the big top-end stuff, Sigil of the Empty Throne, 3 white, whenever you cast an enchantment, you get a 4/4 Angel, and then Doomwake Giant, 4/6 ETB, creatures your opponent control get -1/-1, and then Constellation, whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield, you get that trigger again, and you can obviously trigger it multiple times in a turn. There's a weird tension between Satyr Enchanter and Eidolon of Blossoms because the Constellation trigger is ETB and the Enchanter trigger is cast. So there's a couple of things that I've run into where I had somebody bring in Tocatli Honor Guard against me, and one of the things that you are going to be casting a lot is like Nyx Ram, pacifism, that kind of stuff. So Nyx Ram and Courser Crufix, if you have an Eidolon of Blossoms, they don't get triggered, but if you have a Satyr Enchanter, it does trigger. So in, playing in a Magic Online, obviously it's not a big deal because the client takes care of it for you. But in those scenarios in paper, you have to pay attention to what is on cast and what is ETB. So just keep that in the back of your head if you're going to put this together. The sort of flex slots is like, how much removal do you want to play? 8 slots is what I have right now between Banishing Light, Pacifism, and Seal Away. And so you could play like Crufix's Insight is in this deck. It's just 3 mana, draw 3. It's like, it's 3 mana, look at the top 6, put up to 3 enchantments in your hand, and then put the rest in your graveyard. So I toyed with trying, Commune with the Gods. I haven't tried that yet. Sideboard cards that I've really liked. Leyline of Sanctity has been surprisingly important in this format so far, because this is definitely a deck, because it is like synergy engine based. You can get really, really thrown off by a Thoughtseize. So post board, I really like Leyline. Solemnity has done a lot of work for me.
That card is filthy when it's good. We were talking about White Beetle, and Solemnity is just the same thing.
Yeah. I'm toying with some combination of Ixalan's Binding and Gideon's Intervention. Those are sort of like, and I mean, I guess I could play Nevermore as well if I really wanted to, but so something in that sort of prohibitive enchantment space. But I've liked Ixalan's Binding on 3 off of Herald of the Pantheon. That has solved a number of issues for me. The other nice thing is, if you are playing against like mono black, mono red, any of those kinds of decks, they cannot remove an enchantment from the battlefield. So there just like literally are no cards other than Thoughtseize and Duress that will allow them to remove a resolved enchantment from the battlefield. So, go nuts, right? Like your pacifisms, your seal aways, like Banishing Light is insane against them because it just answers their entire deck. And they have to deal with it. The other 2 cards that I want to sort of touch on, Tainted Remedy. There are a lot of decks that gain life, and some of it is incidental, some of it is on purpose. Tainted Remedy as the fixed Reign of Gore, where it also hits lifelink, is very useful. I run as a one of. If the meta swings to some, position where Sphinx's Rev is like a real thing that people are doing, Tainted Remedy makes Sphinx's Rev really bad.
I do have some good news. Sphinx's Rev is picking up in the context of the Field of the Dead decks right now are just kind of decks that have the blue-white control cards in them.
All right. Trial of Ambition in this deck is a sorcery speed 1 mana edict that will draw you at least 1 card. It's very good. There are people that are playing Bogles or like heroic. I think they've mostly been pushed out of the format at this point, but you might see them occasionally. That's a carryover. Those are probably going to become Virulent Plague, because Field of the Dead is a ridiculous card that needs an answer. So Virulent Plague is the answer to that. It is a 3 mana enchantment. It's 2 and a black from Dragons of Tarkir. 2 and a black, enchantment, creature tokens get -2/-2. There you go. Nice zombies. The bad news is those decks do have ways to get rid of enchantments, but the next level, if you want to like go there, is Heroic Intervention. I came across one Joker that was playing Back to Nature, so Heroic Intervention looked pretty good there.
That card is so rude. I forgot that was in the format.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like $10 because of Commander, but it is definitely there. Heroic Intervention, for those who was not paying attention during Ether Revolt. 1 and a green, instant, permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. I don't know that there's another way for the deck to really, like, without Veil of Summer, to sort of keep the... Oh, I guess... Display of Dominance, maybe? That's deep. Permanents you control can't be the targets of blue or black spells your opponents control. All right. I mean, I guess that does work. It's a little more narrow, obviously. Like, Heroic Intervention is unconditionally better. But this also destroys blue or black non-creature permanents. So, I don't know. Maybe it's Display of Dominance's time to shine. Because it just didn't quite get there in Standard.
I'm okay using it if you need to kill a Planeswalker with it. But besides that, I don't like using it defensively.
It's fair. So yeah, I mean it's a sort of mid-range control deck. There are very few things in the format that can fight their way through a Nyx Fleece Ram. Like that 5 toughness is almost infinity toughness.
Agreed. That card it's shown up in a lot of lists in the last league dump, and just even regardless of the Enchantress stuff, has looked really impressive.
Yeah. And also another option that I looked at is Citadel Siege, which actually turns your Nyx Fleece Rams into game-winning threats. I also very briefly played a Singleton Herald of Torment and won a number of games by bestowing Herald of Torment on a Nyx Fleece Ram, making it a 3/8 flyer, which is just literally impossible to kill. Like, it's not going to win every combat, but it wins a lot of the combats that it's presented with. And it just, the damage-based removal, forget it. Like, you're going to waste 3 spells, and then I still get a Herald of Torment afterwards because it pops off the bestow.
Sadly, does not re-trigger Enchantresses, but, you know.
It doesn't, but, yeah, it would. It would. Oh, no, it doesn't leave the battlefield. No, you're right.
Right. It just goes from being an aura to being a not aura.
Right. Yeah, oh, God, I love it. Like, bestow is one of my favorite mechanics. I wish it got more love.
I do think that the mechanic, in retrospect, like, it was kind of clunky at the time, but now seeing, like, Lucky Clover adventure stuff happen, it's like, no, I'm just glad it works the way it does.
Right. So the other thing that is nice about this deck, it is dirt cheap, like unbelievably cheap. Everything except the lands. The most expensive lands are actually the temples. It runs 4 Temple of Plenty, and then 2. No, I guess so. The lands are somewhat expensive. And it's 2 Godless Shrines, 2 Temple Gardens, and then some check lands and 4 Temple of Plenty. And the Temple of Plenties are like $3 or $4 a piece.
Well,
but outside of that, I mean, it's literally the entire rest of the deck doesn't cost more than $10.
If the reusable part of your deck is the expensive part, that's great. Like, if you're like, oh no, I will never use Godless Shrine again, I'd be wondering why you think that. If you're just like, yeah, I'll just never play a format that involves a Godless Shrine again.
Yeah. The only main deck card that's more than like 25 cents is Courser of Crufix. Because the other like on top of this, Doomwake Giant, Nyx Fleece Ram, like all of that other stuff got reprinted in the Commander deck. So it's even cheaper. So if you are looking for something that is inexpensive to play, also like depending on how things break, like if your local meta is slow enough to sort of like give you a tiny bit of breathing room, and you're really good at winning dice rolls, and also this is a deck that I have to assume is going to get some insane pickups when Theros comes out. So getting just sort of like having this stuff in the can, like sitting in a box, so that 2 months from now or whenever the new set comes out, and it is very likely to have a heavy enchantment theme, you know, I would be very surprised if they didn't take another shot at enchantment creatures. Constellation seems like a lock. I mean, like those are all things that are synonymous with that world at this point. I think it's impossible that something doesn't get printed that is nutty for this deck.
Yeah, I think they are morally obligated to make enchantment creatures. I don't know which of the other mechanics they're bringing back, because again, Bestow does a lot of weird stuff, but it also works, so it's
right.
It's not clear.
So that's that. I will post a list up in the show notes with sort of where I'm at, because like I said, I'm still monkeying around with some of the like the flex slots, the number of lands, etc., etc. So that is pretty much what I got. Do you have any parting shots before we get to the outro?
I don't think so. I think we covered, I've mostly focused on finding the best decks in each format. We covered a lot of that. And then there's a little bit more beneath the surface in each, and it's kind of like, this is what you have to assail, and this is where you have to aim your stuff and take your shots at.
Yep. Merfolco. Mark my words. This will happen. So, before we get to the Spice Rack, you can follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/turn1Thoughtseize, all spelled out. You can follow us on Twitter. I'm at T1Thoughtseize. Ari is at ARMLX. You can watch a stream at twitch.tv/T1Thoughtseize, sponsored by our friends at Card Order. You can see our YouTube videos at youtube.com/turn1Thoughtseize, all spelled out. You can read Ari's columns at starcitygames.com. You can read my columns at blog.cardkingdom.com. You can become a member of the Thoughtseize Cabal at patreon.com/turn1Thoughtseize, all spelled out. And of course, you can see all of our content on turn1Thoughtseize.com. We have an extra spicy spice rack because we have a fake but extremely flavorful card. Ari picked one of the playtest cards from the mystery boosters. So why don't you bring us through that, and then I will do the other one.
I think it's probably just the most important, most on-brand one possible, right? It's Large Pox, which is black, so 4 black. Sorcery. Each player discards a card, loses a life, then sacrifices an artifact, a creature, an enchantment, a land, a planeswalker, and a tribal permanent, just to clean that one up.
Yep.
Then exiles a card from their graveyard, then puts the top card of their library to their graveyard, then removes a counter from a permanent they control, and then gets a poison counter.
I love it.
Just a little bit of everything. Just a little. It's everything spice. It's very appropriate for the spice rack.
Yeah. So I obviously I need a million of these like yesterday. So I'm gonna start poking around to the people that have done mystery boosters. But the card that I wanted to hit on for the spice rack is Afara, God of the Polis. She is 2 white blue for a legendary enchantment creature god. She is a 6/5 indestructible. As long as your devotion to white and blue is less than 7, Afara isn't a creature. At the beginning of each upkeep, if you had another creature enter the battlefield under your control last turn, draw a card. I really like the idea of Afara in a Nykthos, Devotion, like borderline Opalescence, main deck Leyline of Sanctity, main deck Leyline of Anticipation to like power up your Nykthos Devotion early. And then you can just start throwing out like Supreme Verdict. Like, so I'm in my head, I'm thinking like Detention Sphere, Supreme Verdict, maybe Sphinx's Rev, and then like is Day of Judgment. I'm trying to think. Is there another 4-mana Wrath besides Supreme Verdict? I don't think so. Maybe it's 5. There's a bunch at 5. Realm Cloak Giant and a bunch of other nonsense. But having that like tempo control where you're just taking out the entire board but leaving your like 6/5 that's indestructible on the board as just like a way to close the game very quickly and also generate cards. I think that is something that hasn't been explored, and maybe for good reason. In just a regular sort of blue-white X value shell, I think she also has some potential. The white and blue Cavaliers I don't think are particularly good, but I'm trying to like run through stuff that has a lot of devotion.
I think the interesting part with Afara is seeing if we go into the overlap devotion world again, or if effectively you have to build a deck that's like mono blue with a white symbol for Afara, or mono white with a blue symbol for Afara.
Okay.
So that will be the question that I have to ask moving forward into the next Theros set.
But she is a generically powerful, cool card that's relatively inexpensive, that potentially has big upside, and something that it's not like I'm not like the genius that figured out that this would be a good control finisher. Like other people have had that idea. I just think it has particular potential now, especially in the face of some probable future Pioneer bannings that make control actually playable, either printings or bannings, because you can't have a format that is 75% aggro decks forever, because that gets old really fast.
Yeah,
you've got to do something about that one way or the other.
I'm hoping it's new cards.
Sure. Yep. That would be ideal. But you never know. So that is what we got. Thanks so much for listening, and we will catch up with you next time.